Hi, welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, thanks for watching. Well, we got a new hot political topic to talk about, the voter ID law in the state of Pennsylvania. It's back in the news, and it's created something of a controversy, and then we're going to talk with the dean of the University of Pennsylvania School of Veterinary Medicine. All of that following these words.
This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers, a fast-paced, unrehearsed weekly discussion with and about the leaders who shape your world. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
Hi, joining me, as often is the case, is Robert Swift. By the way, I should point out, we're going to have a couple of journalists on this part of the program. Joining me, as often is the case, is Robert Swift. He's with Times-Shamrock Newspapers, and my colleague at WGAL-TV, News 8, if you will, Matt Belanger, who is their Harrisburg reporter. Matthew, let's start with you. Man, all of a sudden, the voter ID law is off the pages, and I'm going to ask Robert a little bit about some other controversies connected to it. But this past week, we get this new report showing that a huge number of people, well, take it from there. What about this huge number of people?
Well, it was released by the Corbett administration kind of late on the day before a holiday. Some people criticized that as well. But this was something that didn't exactly strengthen their argument about that everyone has an ID, which they believe that the number of people in the state without an ID that would be acceptable to vote is small. They sent this study out where they mashed up two databases. They took voters who are registered. They also took some documents from some PennDOT listings and put those together and came up with about 750,000 Pennsylvanians who don't have an acceptable form of voter ID that could be used in the November election.
And that's actually closer to the number the Democrats said were not, would be ruled as ineligible. I guess the argument here, because they didn't have a qualified ID, which would be a driver's license, and that seems to be the biggest or the most common form of voter ID that would be used when you vote.
And of course, Democrats have been criticizing all along, saying that this is part of a larger Republican strategy nationwide to try and disenfranchise. This fits right into.
And it fits right into something the majority leader in the House, a guy named Mike Terzai, take that story.
He was a few weeks ago speaking before a Republican State Committee going on a checklist of things they've done. Like, we've done this, and then voter ID, and will help Mitt Romney win Pennsylvania. And it was, someone was there, made a YouTube sensation, and it was one of these things where you slowly a faux pas, but you,
did you see it was on Colbert? And
you supposedly say what you really mean, one of these mistakes where someone says what they really mean.
Oh, you mean that they really were trying to use it? Yeah, I mean, what's fascinating, Robert, about this is that it seemed to have died a bit, although there is a case that could end up before the Supreme Court of our state to rule on. Go ahead.
Now what? 6-6, by the way.
Yeah, that's right.
3-3. So it's
3 Democrats, 3 Republicans. He's referring to on the Pennsylvania State Supreme Court. Yeah. So we could get a decision out of the Supreme Court on that. Do either of you, both of you, are walking the halls of the corridor of the state capitol routinely? The Corbett administration, they're not going to do anything. They're not going to back down from this, are they, Matthew?
I don't think so. I mean, I think they sent out that information, and it was they've provided a way through PennDOT. They say for people who don't have the IDs to get them for free.
They are trying to make it a little easier, aren't they?
It's a big number. It's a big number. 800,000 or nearly 800,000. There's no way around that.
Now, 20% of them, they say, haven't voted in 3 or 4 years past. Does that mitigate it at all, or do you think Democrats aren't going to leave this alone, are they?
No.
All right, we're going to take a break. There's we're going to pick up on a couple of state budget items. The legislature is gone, but never forgotten in our state. We'll be back and chat about that in a moment.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by BetterSaferRoads.com. To voice your support for safer highways and less traffic congestion, visit BetterSaferRoads.com. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
Hi, welcome back to the program. We're continuing our discussion of the state legislature. They, as I said, they're gone, but they're never forgotten. It's a little fun about this. But in all seriousness, Robert, they've got this huge agenda out there that they were not able to do. And talk about that unfinished agenda.
Basically, they were trying to the very end to get something with charter school, related to funding,
right,
and opening, but more ways to through the state role of creating more of them. That fell through. They talk about trying to do that in the fall. The big drive for state store sale, the liquor store was, taken off the table when the House couldn't even get the votes.
So that's the second. There's a third, the vouchers, right?
The school choice thing was, expansion of the tax credit that exists already, but that's about it. Yeah. And then they have some issues involving state debt, which for Republicans is an explosive issue regarding
pensions, health care.
Well, pensions is more seen as a 2013 issue. Yeah. I mean, no one really thinks they're going to be doing that in 8 days in the fall.
Yeah, and Matt, picking up on it's not just the number of things but they did accomplish. Look, they got a budget review, that a budget done on time, no taxes, and did the educate. Go ahead. What did they get done that I think a lot of people, a lot of Republicans and some Democrats are happy with?
Well, no, I mean I'm sure you're talking about meeting that budget deadline. That's a good checkoff for the Corbett administration for sure, and I don't think so many Democratic members mind getting it done on time. Although they would like to say probably see some more funding for areas.
They restored funding to some big programs.
Yeah, but we can't forget that there were still some painful cuts in that budget, like in the public welfare area. I mean, that $84 million to county-based welfare programs is going to hurt a lot of people. And the cash assistance program evaporates on August 1st of this year.
Yeah, most immediate impact right there.
So, and is that one of the things that
chalk it up to getting it done, I guess.
Yeah, to getting it done. But I think they were determined. I mean, there were certain programs that they weren't going to continue.
Well, that was one, that welfare program.
That would be the big one.
The Corbett administration is looking at anything where the state is going beyond what federal requirements are in terms of welfare. Yeah. And last year was the adult basic program, a health care program that was eliminated, $40,000. This was general assistance. And so that's where you see...
as far as accomplishments, I mean, in getting things done, I think we could look at education briefly here. Is the higher education return to last year's levels, basic education funding, relatively exactly the same, maybe just a small tick up. For all intents and purposes, schools are getting about the same amount of money. There's money in there for distressed schools. I mean, I think, albeit while the Democrats still say, hey, but schools are still dealing with the huge cut they saw during Corbett's first year in office, this year they've escaped it.
I want to talk about energy in the next segment coming up, but there's also, Robert, I think this whole notion about how many days they're in session, how much they spend time in Harrisburg. Maybe some critics would joke and say, well, maybe they spend less time they won't raise anybody, they won't do things they shouldn't do, but 8 days for the state Senate in 6 months, that's all they're going to be in session.
That's true, and even last month in May, I noticed their schedule where they were in 1 week, then they were off a week, then they were in 1 week, off a week. The split schedule, then they were in.
All right, we're going to run to a break. When I come back, I want to talk a little bit about energy and the shale refining. We're going to put the final dot of the I and cross of the T on that. We've talked about a good bit about that. We'll be back following these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by Pennsylvania Credit Union Association. Pennsylvania Credit Unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, check out ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the State System of Higher Education. 14 state-owned universities. The state system is the largest provider of higher education in Pennsylvania. And by the Hospital and Health System Association of Pennsylvania, working towards a healthy Pennsylvania.
Hi, welcome back to the program. All right, let's talk a little bit about this very controversial petrochemical company. It's going to go up in Western PA. There's been a huge tax break. Now, Robert Swift, there's no limit. It was 1.7. Now there's no limit. And we find in the bill there's something else that was not much debated about, a limit on natural gas extraction in 2 counties. How did that occur?
This came up, geographical formation known as the South Newark Basin, Bucks and Montgomery counties. We just did the impact fee law back in March, which have a local or state override of local ordinances. And here, there's provisions now in the law where there's a 6-year moratorium on drilling in those two counties. In those 2 counties, what they do is study. Yeah. Now, this set off people who had just been fighting the impact fee debate, saying, why should these? It's not fair. They're saying, why should these people in this area, which is probably sensitive,
well, they're pretty big. They're big suburban counties, more or less, with
green thinking.
Yeah, and there's also much stronger support for in the polls that we've done, environmental programs. Go ahead, Matt.
This is just really a thorny topic because you have the Corbett administration pushing for this tax incentive. They say it's designed to try and bring Shell to build this natural gas processing facility, however you want to label it, in western Pennsylvania. And they say all of that tax credit is going to be offset and then made even better by all of the jobs and economic activity it's going to bring to the state. But at the other time, as we saw during the budget debate, you have people who are saying we're giving money away to corporations at a time when we're cutting programs for like the needy. And
all right, before I let you guys go, but this is a done deal. Robert, you've covered a lot of these. They're probably not going to revisit this whole business of the tax credit for Shell, for the petrochemical company. You think that's done? They're not going to revisit it?
Done as part of law. Now, Shell they have to that part of the deal we're actually going to
build the plant.
Meet the thresholds. That part is going to take, years to really get going, and you're still...
There is no guarantee, right?
Yeah.
There is no guarantee.
But I'll tell you the one thing. The proposal had Democrats on board from western Pennsylvania, had Republicans on board, had union leaders.
The governor filled the stage that day.
Yeah, and the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry. So you do have a kind of consensus, at least in that community that I've just mentioned, that this is a good thing to do for the
big argument is if you can create a whole new industrial sector and to add to the state's economy, that was the strongest selling point.
All right, when we come back, the Dean of the University of Pennsylvania's Veterinary School is here. We're going to talk about efforts to detect and prevent foodborne illnesses and infectious diseases, something that we've not done. It's an important consideration for what Penn does, and we want to get into that a little bit with the Dean of the school. We'll be back after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by Highmark Blue Shield, changing the way health plans work for business with a variety of plan options for employers and more choices for employees. Information is available at highmark.com. Have a greater hand in your company's health. And by the Pennsylvania Healthcare Association, the future of long-term care.
Hi, welcome back to the program. We're going to do something a little different, even though, we're in a lot of markets and some of them rural and agricultural, and we don't often, talk about things related to foodborne illnesses and infectious diseases. We thought it might be something that would be interesting to our viewers. Joining me for the first time is the Dean of the University of Pennsylvania School of Veterinary Medicine, Joan Hendricks. Dean Hendricks, thanks for coming on the program.
It's my pleasure.
Well, first of all, let's do a little educational stuff, since I'm a professor, and you were probably a professor at one, or still are. There you go.
I used to work for a living, yeah.
I get it. What does a veterinary school do? I think most of us have a sense about it, but I think we probably have a narrow sense about it, and you're going to broaden our horizons here. Go ahead.
Thank you for that opportunity, and it is really a pleasure always to talk about the profession I love and the school that I love. So you probably know the veterinary school at the University of Pennsylvania is the only vet school in the Commonwealth.
Exactly.
And we do serve the whole Commonwealth, and what the great news for any veterinarian is that people think they know what we do and they like us. They recognize their vets as the people who take care of their cats and dogs, and if Fluffy has a lump or, Tiger needs to eat more or eat less usually. The crucial thing about the whole profession, though, is that we're actually important as well as nice. And we're the profession because we take care of animals who produce food and do other work for people. One of the things I like to say is we're the profession that stands between humanity and plague and famine. And that's kind of what you've highlighted.
Let me ask you a question. I mean, that's, I think, a fascinating point, because I'll tell you what, you would know this. How many Pennsylvanians have pets? I mean, I don't know the percentage, maybe you do, but it has to be a huge percent. Typically, we would think, oh, well, my dog has a problem, my cat has a problem, my bird has, I have a parakeet or something, take them to a vet, we don't think of the other aspects of this that are pretty critical, and that's one of the reasons I wanted to have you on the program to talk about this. So go off onto this other aspect that I think is really important for our viewers.
And especially in Pennsylvania, which you and your viewers know, agriculture is the #1 component of our economy. Of that economy, the largest component is dairy. So that's cattle producing milk for us. And all of your consumers want to have milk from healthy animals. And who makes healthy animals? Veterinarians do. So in general, veterinarians take care of animals that produce food, as well as other working animals. Think about it, we're a public health and safety profession.
Right.
So part of the safety component is also training and taking care of all the working dogs. Police dogs, search and rescue dogs, military dogs. So it's often the case, we were just talking before we came on the air about Philadelphia is kind of separate from the rest of the Commonwealth. And in general, in our world today, people have moved into urban settings. You were saying it's about 70% of people on average that own pets.
Really? I'd have thought it may be a little higher, but that's still
higher
that's
in some
a lot
places.
of like in mid-state area and rural parts.
Right.
Go ahead. Yeah, finish your thought.
So there's a real cultural divide, and it's gotten more and more extreme. When I was a kid, you saw cattle, and every kid practically would see a horse. And we're even getting people who come into vet school who are interested in animals who haven't had routine contact with horses. So
Really?
as far as food, the issue that becomes almost dangerous is you have huge amounts of the population around the world, but let's stay in Pennsylvania. So in Philly, Pittsburgh, probably even in Harrisburg, who are thinking in terms of what they're going to buy in the market. They aren't really thinking in terms of where it came from in the first place, and that's what vets do. Vets make sure the animals are healthy and the farmers are economically healthy. Otherwise, we're all in trouble.
In the sense that, the point that I promote about infectious diseases, and I notice here that, things like avian flu and mad cow disease and salmonella, I mean, these, as a consumer, as somebody who knows, political science by profession, I'm clueless about what you do. That's why I'm glad you're here. What does that mean? I mean, these diseases, when you just hear them and you think about, this is pretty serious stuff, affects the food chain, what we eat. What does the Penn Veterinary School do that relates specifically to those sort of diseases?
So it's, again, a great opportunity to talk about the fact that diseases in people are shared with animals. Some of them just because we fundamentally are similar. So animals get cancer, people get cancer. It's not a matter of it spreading. It's just we all share the same diseases. And that's a whole direction that we do really important research that helps animals and people who are born with various genetic diseases and cancer. But as far as infectious disease, most of the new diseases that people get, probably including HIV, definitely salmonella, other emerging diseases, West Nile, avian flu, monkeypox. These diseases start in animals, swine flu. And so people who take care of animals are actually on the front lines. West Nile was first diagnosed by a veterinarian who noticed an unusual pattern of bird deaths. And before you get on the front lines with people, you can actually identify and stop these diseases from spreading. That's what we do.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the public policy dimension of this. I mean, the only vet school in this state, that I did know, and I think lots of our viewers may know that. On the other hand, you also rely to some extent on funding from the state, and now we're in these tough fiscal times, we're in a recession. Legislature and the governor are reluctant to raise taxes. We don't need to get into all that. Has that had any effect on your programming?
So across the United States, clearly public funding of higher education has really been a place that's been pinched really hard. And when I talk to the legislators or the governor or the Secretary of Agriculture, who are the people we talk to most routinely, first thing we say is thank you. Because we know you understand that our mission is critical to the Commonwealth. We also know, we've lived it, that Pennsylvania's gone through some really hard times and everybody's making tough choices. And we've suffered a pretty big drop in our Commonwealth funding. We get about, for every Commonwealth dollar, we raise another $2 on our own through our clinical services or minor component of tuition. We do a lot of NIH federally supported research. But we do get Commonwealth funding. It's absolutely crucial to us.
Has it been cut this year?
This year, it actually wasn't. The governor, they did the freeze, the holdback.
Right.
We were cut, actually, since we're not a public institution, we got no stimulus funding.
Right.
And there was a protective component to the stimulus funding. And so we actually got cut mostly in 2008 to 9.
Okay. Let me ask you, pursuing this a little bit, we're in for a huge medical shortage of doctors, and we do a lot of healthcare research, and we're going to have a serious problem. Are you seeing the same? I mean, what's the situation with veterinarians, the supply, demand? How does that look moving forward?
Well, veterinary medicine is looking at itself really hard because as the public funding gets withdrawn, veterinary schools are asking themselves, for most vet schools, it doesn't happen to be the case for us, but for most vet schools, most of what they can do to raise money is to increase tuition. And they're asking themselves what the market will bear and what their students can do. And the crucial thing is for veterinarians to be able to afford to go into public service. So that's going into rural settings, working with food animals, going into government. There's about to be a really big shortage of government veterinarians. Going into academia. It's not always
to teach
the next generation and to do the good quality research.
Is the supply up or down? I mean, are you having trouble finding people to go into the profession?
Where we're starting to see a crunch, the supply, the number of slots has been flat for a while, and the applicants pool has been flat. So across the U.S., if you take it as a one unit, there's about 2 applicants for every 1 slot.
Yeah.
But in the last few years, about 1,000 new slots have opened up. And there were only about 3,000 new vet school slots every year, so across the U.S. What we're starting to see is our students are graduating with $150,000, $250,000 debt.
Like doctors. Okay.
But they don't make what doctors make.
Well, look, this has been wonderful. I'm glad you could come on. You could explain all of this. I think it was a good learning experience. It's one of the things we try to do on this program. All right, I want to thank you for watching this edition of Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, stay well, and we'll see you next week.